have different comments. So we'll just go around the room, and when you hear about like what's happening, what do you think of, Calvin? And like tell us kind of a little bit, and then we'll go around to Trevor, and then to Reese and to Anthony.
I haven't read too much about it, but I heard that they're basically kind of like making it harder for people to vote, right? Or something like that.
That's one view. So I mean, so there's two sides to this thing, just like everything. There's, you know, in any kind of argument, there's like really three sides, right? There's the their side, and then there's really the truth is what it is. So that's one side. What's does anybody else want to add to that? Okay. So let's think of what the people that voted for that, what were they thinking?
More voter protection.
More voter protection. That's a good answer. And you guys, so I'll give you guys a little bit of info here, since maybe you're not as up on this situation. So the state of Georgia, and if you followed the election with Trump and Biden, the state of Georgia was very controversial in their votes, and they were scrutinized like to the ridiculous levels from former President Trump and some Republicans, to the point where the people in charge of the votes were threatened, their families were threatened. That was the big, you know, as they call it, the big lie, you know, that there was voter fraud in Georgia, because Georgia had historically been a Republican state, and both of those candidates needed that state to win the election. And so there was lots of backstory to this. And so I'll give you a few of the points. Okay, so um, the Republican Party was expecting to win that state. They didn't. Okay, and so then President Trump at the time uh, filed lawsuits and wanted investigations done on all the procedures and the protocols to make sure that there was not voter fraud. And so they recounted the votes by hand. They recounted the votes again by hand. They matched it against what the computers were saying. The information was accurate. They came back, they said there was no voter fraud. Then, shortly after that, the president at the time called the person who was in charge of counting the votes, and said, "You need to find votes. You need to find the exact amount of votes I need to win the election. And you'll be a hero if you do this. And you just need to find the votes." And I'm paraphrasing here, but that's pretty much what he was saying. He was saying, "Look, man, make it happen." And so that guy didn't, obviously, and so there was just lots of controversy on the voting in Georgia. And so some people would say, some people that maybe Republicans view this as, they still believe there was voter fraud that happened, and so which was the impetus, or the kind of the momentum to all of a sudden revamp all the voting rights and protocols. So the Republican Party says, okay, this happened. We believe there was voter fraud. We're going to make sure everything gets tightened up and blah, 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 blah. And we're going to do all these things. And the Democrats are saying, well, we did everything. You know, the case was thrown out of court. There's no evidence of voter fraud. So why would you need to change anything? So you can see there's two arguments of this, and there's really strong beliefs in both directions. Now, when you dig a little deeper and you say, well, how are these new protocols and things like that going to affect people? Um, they make it harder. And, you know, at the end of the day, the people that have less resources, that have less transportation, that have less mobility, um, don't have the same access to vote based on all these new protocols that they put into place. It's making it tougher for them to vote. Um, and so, in a sense, you could say that the end result, from a Democratic viewpoint, you could say the end result of this is that disadvantaged people are going to have more challenges to be able to cast their vote than somebody that has advantages. And so you look at the socioeconomic part of that and you say, well, that you're talking about the poor people of all colors that are going to have more challenges to be able to vote in the future. And so then you dig a little deeper than that and you say, well, who are those people voting for? Well, those people most of the time are voting for Democrats right now because, in their opinion, big industry just keeps winning and winning and winning, and the people that make money in this country just continue to make more money, and the gap between the two is just getting bigger. So you can see this is a complicated issue, um, and so you have all this going on, and lots more than that. Again, I'm paraphrasing this whole thing, and then you have uh, Georgia that has major sporting events coming up. The draft, the All Star game, the Masters, um, and so people that disagree with this law that was passed and are under the beliefs that this is going to definitely create more challenges for disadvantaged people, socioeconomically speaking and racially speaking, um, and and that it's going, we're going backwards in time, um, when there was serious, voter, inequities, and so um, once again, athletics has interjected into this huge social event that's happening right now in our country. And so, um, Major League Baseball has decided to not play the All Star game in the state of Georgia as a protest to this decision. Um, the NBA draft has decided to change their location to another state. And then you've got the biggest golf event in golf, the Masters, coming up this week. That's not going to get changed. I hate to say it. The Masters, in my opinion, will always be played at Augusta Country Club in Georgia. It wouldn't be the Masters if it wasn't there. It's kind of, they go hand in hand. Um, so I don't see them pulling out. But major corporations have also pulled out of supporting the state of Georgia. Coca Cola, I believe, is one of them. And so what's happening at the end of the day is the state of Georgia, um, if you haven't figured it out yet, um, if you follow the money, you can usually get most of your questions answered as to what's happening in our society. And so when you look at those corporations that maybe pull out of Georgia or boycott Georgia, they lose money. You take the All Star game out of Georgia, they lose money, they lose jobs, it hurts their economy. And so it's all about influence, like we talked about even back in the Greek days. Um, and so there's all these implications. Okay, and so um, people are learning that you can protest and you can say things and you can write things and you can do interviews. But the bottom line is that the people that have a lot of people that have a lot of money, um, they they don't they don't understand what's going on until you put it in a monetary form, and then it's like, whoa, hey, I'm not making as much money. We need to talk about this. Okay, so that's kind of what's happening right now, and so. Um, And anybody else have anything to add to that? I don't know if I'm sure I didn't get everything involved in the situation, but what I wanted to talk about today was just kind of lay the situation out there and then talk about both sides. Like, what are the arguments? And talk about maybe some of the impacts. That makes sense. Trevor, yes.
I watched like a pretty good video explaining like all the like restrictions that they made, and one of the restrictions was like they made it illegal for people to deliver water to like the people waiting in line to go vote.
Yep. And why do you think they I mean, why would they make the big deal about a water bottle?
I have no idea.
um, well, I can only speculate because I don't know either. But I think that sometimes people are given incentives to go vote for a certain person, right? And so like for example, um, it's called an inducement, or and just like a college athlete may get some cash under the table to sign with a certain school, um, that stuff still happens at some of the big schools. And so it's like, okay, if you know come and vote today, there'll be free food, okay? Or I'm just giving you alternate viewpoints here, and in many of the locations where people live below the poverty level, um, the lines to vote are ridiculously long, and people sit out in the sun, old people, ill people. And so to provide, obviously the basic essentials, maybe some shade and some water and some snacks while you're waiting in line for, to do your duty as an American. It's hard to believe why they would do that. But I think if I try to flip it to the other side now and say, well, where does it stop? Like, do we say, okay, water, but nothing else? Or do we say, are they getting filet mignon to come out and vote? Because if you, I mean, that could happen hypothetically. And so they have to have some kind of like, because they're worried that people are going to give incentives to get more people to come out to vote a certain way. And if those people that approached them and offered up the incentives are of a certain political party, then it's like recruiting. It's just like recruiting for a team. But yeah, I agree with you, Trevor. I don't see. Um, I try to see both sides when there's a debate or an argument, and providing somebody with water, like going to that specific, you're making an extra effort to make it tough. I mean, of all the things you can argue, the machines, the where the ballot boxes are, all that stuff. Big truck driving by. Hold on a second. You got to make sure I don't schedule this class from 11 to 12 next semester. It's trash day every time I'm on the Zoom with you guys. Um, all right. So, what else do you guys take away from that description and kind of how sports has interjected? What do you think the impact of not having the All Star game there is going to be, other than the financial?
I guess they like you can say they're kind of trying to make like a statement about where they stand on the decision.
Yep.
Uh, organization.
Yeah. So clearly, they're as a group, they're against it. What else could you? What other? How else could this help um, this cause? Of saying this is not right, and then we'll flip it around and talk about the other side too. But so, what other things you how in other ways should I say that this would help that? Yep, Anthony.
So kind of the same thing that Calvin said, like it just brings awareness. Like me personally, I didn't even know too much about what was going on in Georgia, but like something like them pulling out of the All Star game, I feel like that just brought awareness to the situation.
Yeah, that's good. Good answer. You're right on the money. All both you guys are. Anything else you guys want to add to that? Like uh, other impacts that maybe you don't think of? Because a lot of times when we, um, things impact us so differently as human beings, and we all have connections to different things. Um, and so, a lot of times, if you have not experienced the situation, you're really unaware of the impacts. And and so I'll tell you guys just a story here. That this just happened in my life. Okay, so my wife is African American. We have a son who's African American, and I'm a white guy. Okay, so uh, he's in eighth grade, and he's homeschooling right now because of the COVID. And so they say, yeah, we got some new books to go pick up for his English class. So I go pick up the books, bring them home. I don't even look at them. And that night, my wife says, "Did you see the books that they have Nate reading for English class?" And I said, "No." I didn't even look at them. And so one of the books was about um, a slave girl who was bought, and then so the slave owner bought this slave girl for his son, and then gave her to his son, and then she was like repeatedly sexually abused throughout the whole book, and then she eventually breaks away and starts a new life and and is free. And so for me, my wife says, "Well, what do you think about that?" I said, "Well, it's clearly a story about struggle, and um, it's inspiring to see that somebody could go through and live through that kind of terror and horrific life, and then still succeed somehow. And so it's an inspiring story, and my perspective was so surface level. And somebody, we looked at reviews of the book to make sure we weren't being like, I'm learning on this stuff. And so anyway, we look at reviews. Somebody said, "Oh, great book, happy ending," and my wife was like, "This book to me means like A through Z, right?" And to me, it was like, that's an inspiring story. And so there's so many things you don't think about if you're not the person that's being impacted by whatever's going on. And so it's normal for you guys to maybe not know exactly what's going on in Georgia, but now we have a Georgia resident on the call. Um, Good morning, James.
Good morning, everybody.
Hey, we're just having a conversation about what's happening in Georgia right now with the voting procedures and protocols, and then how that's been intertwined with baseball and basketball. And would love to hear some perspectives from somebody from Georgia.
It's been a lot of crazy stuff happening with even with the you remember with the ballots, and they were
Yep.
saying that they had to recount the ballots in Georgia, and it's been a whole bunch of crazy stuff with all that. But I'm not like in Georgia right now, but
Oh,
like I
okay.
heard about everything that's going on, like that's crazy.
Well, so like, how about your family members? What do they think about the law that was just passed, or the process that was just passed and approved
Uh,
about the voting
my
stuff?
mom's husband, he's been talking about it like he talked to me about it, but I didn't really understand what was going on because I didn't even see it like on the news, or I didn't know anything about it because I've been so busy with training and work and stuff like that. So when he talked to me about it, I kind of like got a chance to like reflect on it, and it just got crazy. It's kind of crazy, and a lot of people didn't even know it got passed, so it's just crazy to think that they can pass a law that quick and you not even know that life can change, or things as much can change from one little small thing. You feel me? So I
Yeah.
mean,
So when you talked to, what you said, that was your stepdad or your uncle,
mm-hmm. Not my
um,
stepdad.
was he? How did he feel about it?
I mean, he had like mixed feelings about it because he was like that he can see why they decided to do it, but it's like affecting what it affects is like the biggest part of what he was saying. Like, it affect more than just certain type of people. But I didn't get everything that he was saying, so it was kind of hard to understand at the time. But he was just like, it's a big deal. That's how he was
Yeah.
like letting me know.
Yeah. Well, what they've, the there's two different sides of the story that we've identified here today, and one side of the story is that we want to make sure that future votes are legit, and are the people are accountable. And then the other side of the argument says, well, everything was legit and the people were accountable, and these changes you're asking us to make are going to push us back 50 years, um, when huge voter suppression was happening. And so um, when you look at the changes that they have put in, from one side of the argument, that's going to adversely affect the people that live below the poverty level in Georgia, because the access to places to vote, places you can drop off votes, the ID requirements, the long lines with now, you not being able to provide some basic essentials while they're waiting in line. So um, and in other areas, people walk in and vote. It takes them 2 seconds, and then in some communities, it takes 15 hours, to wait in line. So there's a lot of things, and there's two arguments to that. So we talked about some of the reasons that sports teams, with the NBA and with the Major League Baseball pulling out of there. Reese mentioned that that was a sign of support, and I think it was Trevor you mentioned that it was an awareness. Or maybe I forget who said that, but it was about creating awareness. And another thing that I think that you know these um, corporations and athletes and big money people that are pulling from Georgia, um, it's also um, showing that all these other people from other states, if you talk about the whole NBA and you talk about all of Major League Baseball, that pretty represents the whole United States, and so there's power in that. And so the whole point of this conversation today was to talk about the sports part of it. Is like there's this crazy thing going on socially, and sports is going to have some huge impact on it, or could potentially have some huge impact on that. And when people start feeling uh, that financial flow starting to slow down, a lot of times that's the awareness that they need. But can you guys, what do you guys think in terms of, um, have you followed that story enough to say that you think that they did enough to prove that there was no voter fraud? Is there any of you guys that feel that? Yeah, Reese.
I mean, just from what I know about last election, is that they did the recount and then they did a hand count, and Biden actually got more votes than he did originally after those recounts and everything. And let's say, that just like there wasn't really any proof in any of the trials or the cases that were presented to the courts. So I think that there wasn't enough evidence to support the new law.
Yeah, that's a good perspective, and I'm kind of on your. I kind of agree with you on that, but I'm open to other perspectives too. I mean, of course, you want votes to be legit, and but when you examine something, and this is my opinion now. So when you examine something, the way that they examined that process of that vote, and they came back with zero evidence of anything, and then you hear that phone call where he's saying you need to find me 11,000 votes. Um, it's just hard for me to think that there was corruption there, to that level of scrutiny. And anyway, so I totally agree with your perspective on that, Reese. Does anybody have a different perspective on what's happening? And that's okay too. As I mentioned, I was telling you guys that story about how some things impact us in different ways, and definitely at different times of our lives. When I was your guys' age, um, I knew nothing about politics. I hate to say it. I was totally 100% immersed in coaching football or playing football, um, and as I've gotten older and paid more attention, um, sometimes again you see things a little bit different. So like my wife, instead of seeing that story that I mentioned to you guys as a inspirational story, it's like, that's the freaking worst story I've ever heard. this poor girl, like what, it makes me, it brings up all these emotions and all these feelings. And, yeah, she got away, but what kind of life is that, and so it was, such a valuable conversation that she and I had together about that, and ones that we have all the time. Um, which is really healthy. But I tried to say like, well, so her argument was that maybe that book was inappropriate for eighth graders because they don't understand the depth of what that book could do potentially to an African American female in the class. All of a sudden you go out on the playground and words from the book now start getting repeated out on the playground, not knowing the level of depth that those words have to other people. Um, I grew up in an area that was predominantly white, but um, I had an African American brother that lived with me and lived with our family, and I had Jewish friends and I had Latino friends, and um, when you get close to people, sometimes your boundaries get a little lessened and you can say things to each other that are more acceptable than somebody you don't know coming up and saying things to you. You joke about stereotypes and things like that with, and my brother would tell me, he would make fun of me because there were certain things that I did goofy and I'd make fun of him and certain things he did. And it was like, it was acceptable in that group of people. And then I had another friend that kind of came new to the group, and we were kind of just chopping it up, giving each other a hard time, ripping on each other like we always do. And this dude like went berserk, and I was like, whoa, dude, you're like totally out of line, man. What's the matter with you? And it was because we didn't understand the depth of what those words meant to him. And um, and it was a really good learning lesson. We tend to believe that people think like we believe, and in some ways we do, but certain triggers can really, really impact somebody. And so, when we now translate this story that I just had to Georgia, people say, well, um, yeah, they want to get the vote right. Simple. And you go, oh, yeah, well, that makes sense. Why wouldn't they want to do that? And then you go, well, I'm this person that lives in this little town and I have to drive an hour and a half to a voting box and then wait 16 hours in 110-degree heat with 90% humidity. And there might be a tornado coming through there or something. I mean, Georgia's got some crazy weather. Um, and, like, yeah, why would you, so the incentive to vote is like, okay, well, we're going to take the bus. Okay, and then we're going to walk a couple blocks and then take another bus. And I mean, that's a lot to do then, as opposed to somebody that drives down to, the voting booth, like at the corner, and there's nobody in line, and you drive up, you vote, you leave, you're done. Um, and so we don't see that depth a lot of times. And so the athletes interjecting here, the awareness, and whoever said that again, I think it was Trevor maybe, or one of you guys, the awareness that creates, it makes it deeper for people to understand. Okay, they realize like, well, this is like way more than just trying to get the vote right. This is some heavy duty stuff that's going to impact people differently, and unequally. And so that's where I think sports has done such a great job over the years. And Dr. Harry Edwards said, in one of his videos that we watched last week, was that, you know, um, from the moment sports existed, sports has been intertwined with society and sociology. And he was talking about when, um, he was doing his dissertation, and they were not giving value to the fact that they thought sports impacted social uh, environments. And so really he is like the founder of this subject. It really hadn't been studied much prior to him, and so he's a really valuable resource. And He's been on our campus at Santa Rosa Junior College and spoke before. And so I'd just encourage you guys to listen to his some more of his links for this class, because whether you agree with him or not, he brings up things that provoke thought, and then that thought equals a deeper understanding. So when you hear a word that's a trigger for somebody but not a trigger for somebody else, you're going to understand a little more why, and which makes you going to make you a better human being, and just understanding people. So um, I think it's so timely that this is happening in Georgia, and we're having this class right now. I kind of put the progression of what we were going to do on hold for a little bit because I wanted to talk about this subject. I think it's just crucial right now at this time, because now all of you guys could turn on CNN or news and really see in real time what's happening with this and how this is going to impact. So, do you think it's possible that this will be revoted on the next time and have a different outcome based on the reaction that these people saw, or the people from Georgia have seen? What do you think about that? So let's say you own the stadium where the All-Star game is going to be, and you voted for the voter thing, and then all of a sudden no All-Star game, and you're going to lose $100 million. You might think twice about voting for that the next time, right? Um, and so there's a deeper understanding, and maybe at the time somebody says, hey, you should support this, and this is what we're trying to do. We're trying to make it fair, we're trying to make it accountable and all this stuff. And so you go, yeah, that seems like a great idea, that's a no-brainer. And it's until we dig deeper, it's until we have that thought. So something's got to provoke the thought to make you dig deeper, to get you to understand a little better, and then you start understanding those impacts. um, and by the end of my conversation with my wife about this book, um, you know, my comment was, well, there's probably other inspiring stories that don't involve a young girl being raped multiple times that by her slave owner. Like, there's probably other inspirational stories, but there's also part of me that says, well, in history class, when they study the Holocaust, um, man, that's going to have real triggers for the people of Jewish descent, and when they talk about any wars or any things that where there was big tragedies, when they talk about uh, the atomic bomb being dropped, our students in that class, are there triggers for those students that are from those areas, who have suffered horrifically from the consequences of those. So, man, and you're these issues are going to come at you, and when you look at it, when I look at this story with my wife, I said, well, they talk about this, they talk about this, they talk about this. You have to talk about these subjects. And my wife's response was, I agree, but you can't just give somebody a book when they're 14 years old and expect them to have any depth and understanding of the content in that book. There needs to be a preparation to read a book like that, and then a talk afterwards after a book like that. And um, and it made me understand. It made me a little more aware of, like, I never thought of that. When you go back to even just like Cowboys and Indians, right? The Cowboys seem to always win. And I never thought of a Native American student that may be in the class, like, screw those Cowboys, like, and you never think, like, everybody's got their perspective. It's so simple to us, like, oh, it's come on, it's no big deal. But when you've experienced it, so it's really, really important that you kind of seek out those things that are going to make you think. Like Dr. Harry Edwards, he's going to say some things, and you're going to kind of go, I don't know if I agree with that, or I totally agree with that, but you're going to think about it. And that's what this situation, or this occurrence with my wife, the same thing happened. And I'm really proud of her, because she called the teacher and had a conversation, and then she talked to the principal and had a conversation, and both of them had a deeper understanding and awareness as a result of that conversation, and they're now implementing parts of the class that will prepare students to read a book like that, and then prepare them to finish a book like that, and what happens after that. And now that you have triggers, now that you've loaded every kid in the class with triggers for different people, you have to teach a responsibility with the words that you see in these books and all those types of things, and give an awareness to how they may affect certain people. And that is pretty tough to do when you're just a young kid. So it's a challenge, but I'm proud of my wife for doing that, and she's an athlete. So there's just one more example how athletics, it's intertwined. She's a coach, she's a trainer, she's a track athlete, and so that literally just happened like yesterday. And then both these teachers thanked her for bringing this up and saying, man, I never even considered like how that would affect somebody in the class, and so now they do this stuff. So that's how change happens. And so when you say things that provoke thought, and then you gain a deeper understanding, it creates more openness for change and to do things maybe a better way. And I think that's what I mean. I'm assuming, Dr. Harry Edwards. I think he purposely says things that are going to provoke things, and feelings inside of you, and that are going to hopefully get you to examine yourself and examine the situation a little better. Um, what are other reasons other than the fact that now I'm going to switch topics here or pivot in a different direction? Let's talk about the Masters. Okay, the most coveted golf tournament in all of professional golf, probably the most historic. Always been at Augusta Country Club in Augusta, Georgia. Um, and if you're not familiar with golf, or you're not familiar with Augusta, Georgia, or Augusta National, it is an exclusive country club. And up until 9 years ago, women weren't even allowed to be members. Um, that is very, it is not a very diverse membership, as you could imagine. Um, and so, you know, do you think it's even possible that a sport or that an event like that could say we're not going to hold, like the PGA could say we're not going to have the Masters this year, we're going to boycott Georgia? What do you think are some factors that might factor into that, yes or no, that it could happen?
I think the risk would be big because of the money and the publicity they would be losing. But I think if somebody like wanted to stand for like a greater cause or make what's going on bigger than the Masters, then it probably would, like, I guess, grasp everybody's attention to the point where they won't even be focused on the Masters. They just want to handle what's going on with Georgia, because I guess that would be more important. Because in a way, if everybody have to go back and vote, right, and let's say that the people who voted the first time maybe have to work or can't call off of work or get a babysitter or might be in a predicament where they can't go back and vote or get their vote in. So that means that the election would be, I guess he would go back. Trump would be president again.
They wouldn't go that far back. But if you did do
I was
that,
just kind of asking
if you could
questions,
go
but
back in time, yeah, if you could go back in time, and he won, they would have never even talked about this. This would have never even came up. I mean, I'm speculating, but what about the people that do you think the participants in professional golf, and I'm talking about uh, race now, okay? Do you think the participants in golf are have anything to do with um, maybe why golf hasn't done more?
I mean, I think if we being real about, like,
Yeah,
I'm
that's what
from
we
I'm from
want.
Georgia. You know what I'm saying? I'm from Georgia, so I'm just gonna keep it raw. Like, growing up, like, it's always been politics in the South. Like, no matter where you go in the South, it's gonna be politics. It's gonna be some, like, I guess the racist thing ain't like out there how it used to be, but it's always gonna be there in the South. Like, you're gonna have places where you're gonna see a lot more whites than you see blacks. And like, even growing up where I'm from, like, I'm from originally from Macon, Georgia. To this day, Macon is still segregated in some kind of way. Like, even if it's, well, all the blacks go to these public schools and only the whites get to go to the private schools, or it's really hard to get into like the private schools, like private high schools and private middle schools. And then you have like the neighborhood sectioned off where the north side is only this prestigious type of people, then everything else is like the hood. Like, literally everything where I come from is the hood, besides like where the rich people stay. Everything else is, even middle class is like the hood to us. You get what I'm saying? So it's like me being in California, like when I first time coming to California, just seeing the diversity and seeing how more open people is to, like, like just different ideas, it kind of blows my mind, because where I come from, people are so small minded. And then, the powers that be control everything forever. So everything always been like that. So nobody knows anything different. Sometimes I can't even blame a person who's racist because they was taught that. And it goes back so far back that, like, it's way deeper than we can even comprehend. You know what I'm saying? So it's just like, but like, I think that got most of the thing to do with it, because most people, it's not that many black people in like the PGA tour, and a lot of people they more into it for the money. Like, they don't care about what's going on with, that's been done with for them. Like, they trying to get the TV publicity. The Masters is a big thing though. Like, everybody in Georgia knows, like in Augusta, like, they gonna always that's over everything for real. Like, I mean, like, cause I got family in Augusta, so, and I've been like in Augusta when they had it, and I see how important it is, how many people come into the events. Like, the most important people in the world go and see the Masters, so it's like a big deal, like a pretty big deal. So I feel like if it was more, what can I say, like more diverse, you probably have more people concerned, but because it's not, it's kind of lean one way. Like, it's
Yeah.
like,
Yeah, that's an awesome perspective, man. I appreciate you speaking about that. That's super. I mean, how valuable is that to this situation we're talking about? A guy right there from Georgia that's experienced some of these things that we're trying to comprehend and talk about. Yeah, I mean, if you look historically, golf has historically been a predominantly white sport in our country, and um, you look at that as like, why is that? Well, because back in the day, golf courses were part of country clubs, and to be a member at a country club, you had to have money, and you had to live in a place that uh, was probably not the South. It was an exclusive club, and so there was accessibility issues, and so, and then you look at inner cities where the populations are more diverse. Real estate is too expensive in a big city to have a golf course in the middle of downtown. So there's no golf courses, for inner city kids. And you throw lots of other factors in there. And as you narrow it down and narrow it down and narrow it down, golf in the past and still somewhat today was a sport of people that had privilege. And when you see some of the great um, African American or Latino golfers that had careers way back in the day, they started out as like they were the grounds guy or they were a caddy and they got invited, in some weird way they got in, and then and so there's real big time accessibility issues in that sport. And still there still are, even though they're trying really hard to get more kids playing golf and more inner city kids playing golf. It's a challenge. So you have baseball that is very diverse in terms of their players, and they're improving on their coaches diversity. Basketball, clearly diverse with coaches, players, personnel, owners. um, and so, yeah, you're probably going to see the depth of how they feel this decision is going to be deeper than maybe the PGA Tour. And that's kind of the point of this conversation that we've been having, is that, you know, um, we need people that have the understanding of the depth of those things to speak up and coach up the people that maybe don't have the depth of understanding in that. And just like the situation with my wife, that seemed like a story where you go, ah, what a great ending, and then you go, well, no, that's a terrible ending, and I go, why, and so, now I have a deeper understanding of that, and it made me really think about myself, and that's where you have growth, right? And that's where, when you talk about, how sociology and how sport intertwine, that's the greatest thing. One of my favorite all-time things ever was playing college football and getting to know all my teammates and family members who were from different areas, man. And we had guys from Hawaii and Samoa and Florida and Texas and Georgia and Detroit, and um, it's awesome. It was the greatest experience ever. And now that I've been a football coach and I've been able to be around and share time with people from all different states all over the place, like James, from Georgia, and then we guy from Anderson Valley High School, and everywhere in between. It's truly awesome, and I feel like I'm one of the most fortunate people ever, because I've been able to kind of immerse myself in thought-provoking experiences through my players and through the people that I've had the chance to be around, and it's been pretty awesome. And so I hope you guys, you as you go through, different things in your life, man, and just start thinking about that. Open it up and start thinking about, uh, what's the next level. It's like a football game, right? You say, okay, these guys like to run the ball a lot. Okay, yeah, they like to run the ball a lot. Or, okay, these guys like to run the ball a lot. On first down, they run inside zone to the wide side of the field every time behind number 73, their right guard. And then on second down, they usually go to a play action, but sometimes the quarterback just keeps it in boots, and that's another way they get the ball. And then on third down, they're pretty much always going to put a fullback in, and they're going to run ISO in the A gap on the left side off a double team. That's way more depth than saying, hey, they run the ball a lot, right? And that's kind of how every subject is that we deal with in our lives. And so sports always has and always will have massive impacts on the issues that we deal with every day. And so what I would encourage you guys to do, now that we've talked about this subject, it is part of your assignment this week. Do a little research, start watching a little TV, start watching some videos of kind of what's happening, and just get caught up, and hopefully, um, like I said, that will, whether you agree with it or not, that's not the point. It's let's provoke some thought, and let's look deeper and see, and learn more about it. Okay. You guys have any other final comments on this topic, or on anything regarding the class? Well, I was a good conversation today, guys, and hopefully, as time, we don't have too many of these left, but um, you always get more out of a conversation if you're involved in it, man. So I just encourage you guys, don't feel weird about talking about stuff. James, awesome perspectives today. You're the only guy that I can see. I've got sun glaring in my eyes, but I think you're the only African American guy in the class today. And so to have a perspective from you from Georgia on the topic we're talking about, very timely, and we appreciate you. So, okay, you guys, well, you have a good rest of your week. And let's see, it's April 7th. So we got about 15, 21, 28. We got about 5 or 6 Zooms left, and 5 or 6 weeks left of the class. So, get your work in, guys. Go back through the emails, hand in your assignments. Make sure you get an A in this class. I got no issue with giving everybody in the class that does the stuff an A. So get it done, and we'll see you guys soon. I'll be sending you an email this weekend. Hold on one second here. There's something in the chat. I want to make sure I didn't miss something. Oh, okay. We're good. Okay, you guys, we'll talk to you soon. Have a good day.